Hello, massage nerds. Today I'm going to bring you a video on wing scapula and some of the things to look for. This is Chris, my new model. Elizabeth couldn't be here, so we got Chris. And I don't know if all of you know this, but you know there are 17 muscles that attach to the scapula. However, only 6 of those muscles move it, which is the rhomboids major, minor, that's 2, levator scapula, trapezius, pec minor, and serratus anterior is the 6th one. That's the one I'm going to focus on because serratus anterior is the one that usually gives you a wing scapula. And I'm going to show you what to look for. And this is why I have this ruler here, because it's going to give you some tips on what to look for if a client comes in before you work on them. So that way you know what to look for. So one of the things you need to look at is their scapula. You know, draw a line through the scapula, and it should be a little bit tilted up, going up, and his are pretty even. He doesn't have one lower than the other. A lot of times you can tell if they're lower than the other, and his are pretty even, so that's good. The highest point are your acromion. That's part of the scapula. It's like a crow on your shoulder. That's the highest tip of the scapula. That's your acromion process. So you want to make sure that they're even, and you can also tell when he's laying supine how high off the table they are. So I'll show you that. So now he's going to turn around, and this is another way to tell if he's got a wing scapula. So this is your spinous processes right here, and I kind of drew how far apart they are from the spinous processes. The normal is usually 2 inches, or unless you have a larger person, then it's 3 inches. But on this side, he has 2.5 inches from the spinous processes to the edge, to the medial part of the scapula. And on this side, it's a 3.25. So this one's a little bit more winged, and as you can tell, there's a little bit hollow here. So you can tell a wing scapula when it's a little bit more hollow and it's further, you know, from the spinous processes than the other side. So those are the, you know, the things that you can look for: the clavicle, the acromion process, how far away they are, and if it's a little bit hollow. So that's how you can tell if somebody has a wing scapula. And the wing scapula comes really from the serratus anterior. You can turn around again. The serratus anterior is the main muscle for, you know, that moves the scapula. And there are 3 serratus muscles. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about that, because the serratus anterior is the largest one right here, and it's against the thoracic cavity. However, you also have a serratus posterior, superior, and a serratus posterior, inferior. And remember that if you have serratus anterior, if it's 2 words, that automatically tells you that there's another one. That means that if there's an anterior, then there's a posterior. Otherwise, it would just be serratus. Just like trapezius is just trapezius. It doesn't have 2 words because it's only one. So if you have serratus anterior, you have a serratus posterior. And if you have a serratus posterior superior, what does that tell you? That you have an inferior one too. So there are 3 serratus muscles. I'm going to address them, and I'm going to show you some techniques. Okay, so now he's laying supine. So I'm going to work the serratus anterior from here and the pec minor. Remember, the pec minor originates from ribs 3, 4, and 5, and it inserts at the coracoid process. And the coracoid process is part of the scapula. So this is one of the muscles that moves the scapula. And you want to be real careful here, real gentle when you palpate. You know, when you start palpating, see if he's got any trigger points. And, you know, after you've kind of done some petrissage and maybe a little bit of, you know, effleurage, I'm going to start with a little bit of oil here. just to kind of soothe that muscle. This is tender area, so you really don't want to start like right away poking, you know. And you want to be gentle when you're palpating. You know, you want to be gentle with your palpation. You want to do some petrissage over the coracoid process. You can go, you know, go inferior, and you can also go, you know, go up like this here, superior. You can try to grasp the pec minor. So all I'm doing is just grasping. Just trying to loosen up the fibers first before I start working any trigger points or anything on, you know, going deep on the pec minor. And obviously, if you have a female, you want to keep them covered. And if it makes them feel better, you can have them cup their breast out of the way over the covering, just so that you don't, you know, go near any sensitive areas for them. Otherwise, if it's a guy, you know, it's okay. They don't mind most of the time. So anyway, I'm going over the coracoid process, just real gentle movements all the way up to the acromion process. Because remember that the clavicle and the scapula make up the shoulder girdle, and you've got your acromioclavicular joint, which is right here. And that's another way. When you're sitting down, I forgot to mention that at the very beginning. When you're sitting down here at the edge of the, you know, of the table here, you can see where I drew his acromion processes, and I measure with my thumbs to make sure that they're even. And actually, this left side is slightly higher than the one on the right side. It's lower. It's about I would say it's a good inch lower. This one's higher, so they're kind of like this a little bit. So I can tell that this one's a little bit more winged. This is the one that has a little bit more wing anterior tilt of the scapula. So that's another way that you can measure the acromion processes when you are laying, your client's laying supine. So let's say, okay, now I have finished warming up the muscle. So now I'm going to do a little bit of some pin and stretch. You can use fingertips, finger pads, or you can use your palm. If you are using your palm, just make sure that if it's a female that you're not cupping down, that you're, you know, you're cupping away. Okay, and then I am going to stretch some of that pec. You know, some pin and stretch. That's all I'm doing. It's just some pin and stretch. And I'm moving my palm as I move closer to the origins, and I'm going to move his arm a little further out just to get a bigger stretch on that pec. Okay, now that's a passive range of motion. I'm going to ask him to move his arm and move it across. There you go. That like you're hugging somebody. Okay, and back. Okay, so that's protraction of the scapulas. Okay, so that's protraction and retraction of the scapula there. So you can do 3 or 4 times this movement here. Okay, once you're done, you know, you can kind of soothe that pec minor again. And like I said, if you're going to feel for the coracoid process, be real gentle. I like to do circular, you know, movements around it, but be very gentle with it, okay? Because it is very sharp. That's the little hook of the scapula. So I know a lot of people say, wait, I thought the scapula was in the back. It is, but the, you know, the coracoid process is right here. It's the little knob, and it's about 1 inch below the clavicle. So now that we've warmed up the tissue here, I'm also going to work right here the serratus, and I'm going to go to the opposite, so contralateral here, and I am going to do some raking from this side to start warming up the tissue here. So what I'm doing, the origins of the serratus are from ribs 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So all of this, and it looks like a serrated knife. So I'm just trying to warm up the tissue here and do some raking. Go the way the thoracic cavity goes, because they attached on the thoracic cavity here. You can do some slow movements. You can use your whole palm, or you can rake. And this is the muscle, the main muscle that gives you a wing scapula, the serratus anterior. Serratus anterior, along with the triceps, is the one that delivers a punch. Or for people that are always, working with their arms in front of them, this is one of the common muscles. So you want to make sure and really work this muscle out. If you have a wing scapula, you've got to work out the serratus anterior. Okay. So another movement that you can do is you can put this underneath your head here. This really opens up the serratus, okay? And I'm going to sit down for this one. And this young man likes to go rock climbing. He's got all he has a broken bone right now on his wrist, and he's still here for us. So, and then he's got a scar here. But anyway, right here, this is a perfect place for you to address trigger points. Now, the main trigger points for the serratus are like almost right here in the axillary area. Let me see. Do you have one here? Right there? Okay. So he has one right there, and after I've warmed it up, now let me look for my tools. Okay, remember this is the one for trigger points. So if he has a trigger point, I can hold this trigger point right there. Oh, is that too much?
No.
Is that? What's on a scale from 1 to 10? Is that like a 5?
Like a 3.
Like a 3? Okay. Don't take anything above a 5. And you hold it from 90 seconds to, no more than 90 seconds. And I like to move it around a little bit. So the main trigger points for the serratus anterior are like right underneath here, under the armpit, and also in the posterior part, and I'll show you where another one is. And please be careful when you get into the axillary area, because remember you have the axillary plexus, you have a nerve plexus through here, so you want to make sure that you're not on a nerve. And the nerve that supplies the serratus anterior is the long thoracic nerve, and a lot of times that can cause the paralysis also of the serratus. So you want to go ahead and use a lot of long strokes to soothe and to go to the origins. I can tell where the pec major and pec minor are, and the serratus is below that, underneath that. So it's a little tricky to get to, but you can get to some of the edges of where they originate. And this muscle inserts on the anterior part of the scapula. So I can see his scapula is right here, it's sticking out. So this muscle, like a serrated knife, and it inserts on the anterior part of the scapula. So it's on this side. So like I said, I use this for trigger points, especially if they are very muscular and I don't want to tire out my thumbs. I can use this. And if I want to use the other one, let me see. I also have this one. This one's really good for long strokes. And it doesn't hurt. But this one's really good to get to the serratus. And the lats. You're getting the lats here. Remember, the lats form the axillary fold, the posterior axillary fold. This draws out more blood flow to the area. And it doesn't hurt. You always want to stay within the pain tolerance of your client. And if you want to go in between the ribs, because this is also a muscle that helps to open up the rib cage, along with the serratus posterior, it opens up the rib cage for breathing. So if you want to get in between the intercostals, the bevel tool, is the perfect tool to use, for in between the ribs. And this tool, you lay it like at a 45, it's not straight up like this. It's at a 45-degree angle, and you go like through between each rib. And you're also getting each one of the little like fingers from the serratus anterior. I'm just running it right in between the ribs. So I got all kinds of tools today that I wanted to show you, because I know a lot of people have been asking me, how do you use the tools? So this is a great place for you to use the tools, and having his arm extended, you know, underneath his neck really opens up the serratus anterior. Really, really nice. And you can just warm up the tissue, stretch it out, and you know, you can even do, this is not your broken wrist, is it? Okay, good. I don't want to be pulling on the broken wrist. Okay, you always want to assist your client to put his arm back. And another one that you can do, and this one's difficult for me to do because I'm small and my hand is small and he's got big muscles here. So you're trying to get movement of the, you know, the ball and socket, the glenohumeral joint is, you know, there's 3 bones. The scapula, which is the one we're trying to release, and the clavicle, and the humerus. So one of the techniques that you can do is you grasp like by the biceps, and you're going to go from internal rotation to external, and then you're going to move. I'm trying to do this, but like I said, this one's difficult for me because he's really got big biceps and triceps. And this is not your broken wrist, right? No. I'm trying to be extra careful. So what I'm trying to do is create some movement in that glenohumeral joint. This is where you have a labrum tear, though, right? He's got all kinds of stuff going on. He makes a good client, but I'm going up, you know, close to the head of the humerus, and then just moving down and going from internal to external rotation. And if you have a good, you know, grip, you can really move the glenohumeral joint, moving again the scapula. Okay, so after you've done without the stretches and worked specifically and worked the trigger points, then you can move on to the sideline and the prone position. So stay tuned, because that's going to be part 2 of the video.